Hi, everybody, and you're very welcome to the Ability Series. This is a partnership between Specialisterne and As I Am to engage employers in considering how they can become more inclusive of autistic candidates. It's also a portal of information to support autistic candidates and their families in preparing for the workplace and identifying the steps you can take to access both the services of Specialisterne and employment more generally. We're doing this series in unusual circumstances. COVID-19 has prevented us doing many of the in-person engagement events we usually do during the year. So this is our way of trying to continue to bring businesses and candidates support during this difficult period. Over the course of the series, we're really going to be exploring all of the different facets of employment from the perspective of both candidate and employer. But today we really want to set the scene, and we want to talk a little bit about the work of Specialists in Ireland over the past 6 years, and really to show you a best practice case study, SAP in Ireland, who really led the way in this area over the last 6 years, to give you an opportunity to see inside their program how it's worked and what are the learnings for both candidate and for company. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce on the webinar today our guests. So we're joined by Peter Brabazon, who is the General Manager of Specialists in Ireland. We're joined by Kristen Doran, who heads up SAP's Autism at Work program. We're joined by Liam Ryan, who is the General Manager of SAP here in Ireland, by Nick Rankin, who was one of the first employed candidates by Specialists in an SAP here in Ireland, and by Richard Hughes, who's a manager who supports the Autism at Work program within SAP. So without further ado, Peter, it would be great if you could explain a little bit more about the work of Specialisterne, how it was set up here in Ireland, and also what's been achieved over the last number of years.
Thanks very much, Adam, and thanks very much, everybody, for being here today in these as unusual circumstances. Basically, we've been working with As I Am as partners in this program called the Ability Program, which funds us and As I Am, and in particular is funding the webinar series today. So just to let you know, you'll see the logos and that at the end. Ability is funded by the Irish government and the European Social Funds. So really today is a real opportunity to tell you how we operate through the actual experience in SAP. That is, SAP is now the key employer of candidates from us. Last year, it employed a quarter of all the people that we had, and in employment, that is 11, or 1 quarter of 44, obviously. And so, in a nutshell, we're about Specialisterne is about gaining employment for people with autism or similar challenges, so-called neurodiverse people. That is similar challenges like dyspraxia, dyslexia, ADHD maybe, and some others. So we've been operating, as I said, 7 years, founded at the very end of 2012, and then we went on to expand and start to work at the very, very start of 2013. Our logo is that of the dandelion, which is out now in its yellow flower form, and basically that is the first that gives the nectar, first plant that gives the nectar to bees, and we know how important bees are, and yet we don't really treat the dandelion as a flower. We more sort of think of it as a weed, but actually somehow that's a sort of a symbolic of what we think about people with autism. That is basically, if they're nurtured and in the right place, they're employed, or unfortunately, if they're not, they're unemployed. But in a nutshell, in that 7 years, we have worked about 700 people, and we've enabled about 250 gain employment. And at this stage, we have over 30, maybe nearly 40 employer partners like SAP, and particularly last year was a great success in building those partnerships. We're continuing to work in these really difficult times. And thanks for all our partners and their support. I was just saying that last week, 2 of our contractors had their autism contractors had their employment extended, and 1 more, indeed, with SAP has been offered a job just this week. So what we're doing is we're about assessing people with autism who have the skills for work and to see what's the best fit. So we're a matching service working with employers. And then we're supporting them then when they get into work, and particularly on the ongoing basis. And particularly, of course, at this time where it's so important to get support when most are nowadays working from home. So in later webinars after today, we'll expand in details of what we are actually doing. And you can actually go to our website, which we'll be advertising at the end, specialisterne.ie, to find out more as well. But we're really grateful for all the support, and you'll see why now in a minute, that SAP have given us. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. And I think for many people listening today, it'll just be really exciting to see that there is support out there, because I think a lot of the time the narrative around autism is focused on children, but obviously you're an adult for an awful lot longer than you're a child. And we're seeing a huge generation of autistic people grow up right now who are going to need support and opportunities to access the workplace, and who have a huge contribution to make. So I suppose for people sitting at home listening, be they be an autistic candidate who wants to get in touch, or maybe a family member who wants to get the ball rolling, how can they get in touch with Specialisterne?
Well, probably nowadays, the best is through our website. So if you go into our website, there's a contact form there, and you can apply. That's the best thing to do. And in that way, then you'll gain immediately almost the services of our people. And I could expand on that if that's okay for a second, Adam. What I mean by that, particularly in this time, we're supporting, as I say, 44 people in work, and actually it's gone up to 65 now, and because of the previous years. And really what we're doing is, when so many are working from home, we're working on people's anxiety, because it's a new experience working from home, and that's a big thing for us. But at the same time, if you haven't been working with us before and you want to get in touch with us, please do, because we're still doing our assessment type programs and making a fit. And we're very much talking to new companies, admittedly this way through webinars and that, but and Zoom. But it's actually working out very well. And a lot of people, maybe it's because some HR departments, clearly not SAPs, have a bit more time on their hands and have really shown up their interest.
Thank you. And I think it's really interesting, the point you're just making about how Specialisterne is continuing work during this time, because I know for many people, and we just did an As I Am a survey last week on COVID-19 and the impact on the community. And there's a lot of people very anxious, and they're anxious at the moment, obviously, about all the unknowns, but also actually it's very hard sometimes when you've been out of routine for a long period of time to get easily back into routine. So I guess if there's a candidate sitting at home and someone who really wants to access the workplace, but they maybe think they won't be able to start work until after this crisis, what are the things you would advise them they should be doing now in terms of preparing as a candidate to access the workforce?
Well, it goes back, it's like anybody else, autistic people, most of the features that they have of their characters is the same as everybody else. So one of the things that you could start doing is updating your CV, a simple thing to do, but it's amazing how many people we meet haven't done that recently. And the other thing is, particularly if you have a family member maybe who is in business, even if it's running a small shop or a pub, is to actually do some mock interviews. Now, once you join up with us, we'll do the same for you with both those things. And also, if you've been working with a counsellor, for example, it's important in this time that you keep that up. In other words, so as to maintain your good sense of being and reduce any anxieties that can definitely occur for everybody in this type of period. I know myself that walking has become key to my life. Unfortunately, my dog has become key to my walking. His little legs are wearing out. But it is important that we do engage in things, and possibly, but don't force yourself or don't worry about it too much, is to start to take on possibly a new hobby. Or if, for example, if you're an IT guy, for example, maybe just learn that new piece of software or something that you said you would learn. In other words, anything that brings mindfulness. It can be very simple things for some people, but anything that gets you into space. And if you were doing, for example, things to help like yoga or something like that, definitely do them now. It's really good. I don't know if anybody else is doing that thing, but certainly all those type of things, ever more than ever, they work really well.
A lot of really good ideas there and food for thought for people. I guess another thing, we spoke about anxiety there, and something that I suppose can be overwhelming, certainly for those of us involved in the advocacy space, is we know that somewhere between 80 and 85% of autistic people are either unemployed or underemployed. That's obviously something we need to change big time over the coming years, particularly as we see more people grow up, because it's not only a loss for the autistic person, it's a huge loss of talent for businesses, and it doesn't make sense. But I guess one of the things, and we've worked obviously closely together over the last 6 years, are you seeing a shift and an increase in engagement from businesses? Are more businesses wanting to come on board and hire autistic talent?
Yeah, very much so. Particularly last year, as I mentioned earlier on, there's now very much an acceptance that it's moved on from corporate social responsibility to more inclusion, or diversity and inclusion, as a lot of the programs are called, are now the new expression, of course, is coming in, as neurodiversity and employment of people with neurodiverse skills. And that's like for us last year, we doubled the number of companies that we were working with. And a lot of them we've to finish off and that to take our first people from us, and that, but it's very good. Similarly, the public sector, which we didn't get into for a long time, has now come to us. And indeed, it's interesting that our first two people that we placed in the public sector were in revenue, and very much the center of government in a way. And we learned also that they have the biggest IT system in government as well. So very much a place that we had been trying to get into. There's a few little things that have to be fixed there as they get used to us working. But just like we started in the private sector with SAP, and that SAP then gave the model for other companies to follow. And what we'd like revenue to do for us is to do for the same for the civil service, and indeed for the semi-state as well. There's a lot of opportunities in semi-state companies who are good. They have a social aspect, but also they're very much enterprise agencies as well. And they're very strong supporters of ours. Indeed, we have one in NTMA currently as well, and one in the Taoiseach's office, so which is pretty nice for us. I wonder, is he keeping an eye on them?
Thank you so much, Peter. So I suppose where I want to really go next is, and I think you'll relate to this as well, sometimes those of us involved in advocacy and nonprofits, we can have nice ideas, but people maybe in business will think, sure, that's not actually possible or applicable. So it's really important that we kind of complement our message with people on the ground who've done this, who know it works, and who think it's something businesses should get involved in. And I suppose SAP is a brilliant example of that. And I think we'd love to hear from Kirsten Doran, who's the HR lead in SAP for the Autism at Work program. I suppose for people who maybe aren't so familiar, and I'm particularly thinking about business audiences who want to make an impact in this area, but who aren't so familiar about what are the sort of barriers autistic people face, what might I need to do? We'd love to hear from you about the experiences of your candidates and also your experiences as a business in meeting those barriers and removing them.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So what I would say first and foremost is it's important as a business to partner with an organization such as Specialisterne. So someone whose business is autism and who really understands people who are on the autistic spectrum. So that was our first move and has allowed us to be successful in this space. And what that allows us to do, and what the candidates to do, is to find each other effectively. So when someone who's on the spectrum is looking for a role, they would typically follow the process that anyone else would. They would send in a CV through a website, be called for an interview. And the experience that I've heard about and that Specialisterne will have experienced a lot is that doesn't get the candidates anywhere. And there's a number of reasons for that. So one is because they may not have had relevant work experience to what they're doing yet, but they have huge potential, but that's not showing on their CV. So they may be screened out at a CV level. So that's one barrier. The second barrier is if they even do get in front of a company and an audience, the interview itself can be a huge obstacle and challenge for the candidate, based on anxiety, based on some of behaviors that are expected in interviews, and maybe candidates aren't comfortable demonstrating those behaviors. So what Specialisterne can do to help organizations to find the candidates to remove those barriers is they work directly with the candidates in coaching them in terms of when they work with them on their CV. They improve their CVs so that they can be consumed by businesses and have the information that we require and what we want to look at first and foremost. And then they also help them and coach them through interviewing techniques and approaches. So that's huge help for the candidates themselves. Then in terms of how we partner with Specialisterne is they guide us in terms of what makes sense in terms of interview process and onboarding. They would suggest that particularly they've already done their own assessments of the candidate, and they'd be able to say, okay, we think this person's going to work really well for you in a customer facing role or in a development role. So then we can target the managers that we would have who'd be looking, as opposed to, again, just looking at a pure CV where you don't get the full picture of the person. So we can then actively pursue what organization within our business is going to be a good fit for the candidate. And then we would organize a version of an interview. And I think that's really important to mention, that it's not a straight interview where you've got 3 people from the business grilling the one individual. We would have at most 2 from our business. Often the candidate would be accompanied by someone from Specialisterne to provide some moral support and just back up. And then we would have it be much more of an open conversation. We definitely would, we've been encouraged, and we encourage our leaders to ask a lot of questions, release that anxiety, and allow the candidates to really be able to shine and demonstrate their skills, which in a normal interview setting isn't always the case. There can be more of an intimidation tactic, whether it's intended or not. So those are some of the ways that we've worked with Specialisterne to overcome the barriers. And then there's also the barrier of onboarding people. So if you have a candidate that's got to the point of actually being hired by a company, they still may not be as successful as we'd like them to be without the support of Specialisterne and without the organization knowing that they are on the spectrum, because there are different things, very, very simple things that can be done to ensure that person is comfortable. And it's anywhere from, clear expectation setting, if they want a routine, if they like to be in a place that's noisy or not noisy. It's just understanding all those very small nuances to help the person to be successful. And then we partner with Specialisterne to ensure that that is in place for the candidates once they're onboarded as well. So those are just some of the basic things in terms of being able to ensure the person can gain access to a business and then be successful once they're placed within the business.
Fantastic. It's really, really interesting. I guess I just have a couple of follow-up questions just to pick up on some of the points that you've made. I think one of the things is, even for those of us who are on the call, those of you from business backgrounds, I'm conscious that we're all very close to this issue and know a great deal about it and stuff like that. I'm conscious that for people who maybe haven't heard about the concept of inclusive recruitment or autism-friendly employment before, it can be very, very overwhelming. And there's a lot of jargon associated with it, and sometimes there can even be fear. And, some of the sort of words that we hear are big words like reasonable accommodations. And I guess that might be enough to make employers panic. What will I have to do? Am I going to have to be knocking down walls and redesigning the whole office? So you touched on some of it there, but can you give us some examples maybe of the sort of accommodations SAP has had to make and how difficult that has been or not?
And I think this would be, if people listening to this webinar take one thing away from them, it's this point, which is the reasonable accommodation is just that. It's reasonable, and it should not be any barrier to starting up this program in your business. And we started small. We started with hiring 3 people at once. We've had countries in SAP who just start with hiring 1 person and see how that goes. So you can start at a very small scale as a pilot and see how it moves forward. So some of the accommodation that we would have looked at thus far is and actually I'll let Nick talk to one piece of it, but we'll let him. I won't steal his story now, but I'll let him talk to that piece. But we would absolutely look to ensuring that the person is comfortable, and that can be in their desk setup. So what does that look like? Does that mean that they need to be in a corner by themselves because they want quiet? No. It means that if someone does find an open space a little bit overwhelming, that we get headphones that would be sound muffling headphones, which again, any neurotypical person might want as well. You have people who do want to sit by a window, so we move as best as we can to have them have more light. We have people who don't want natural light, so we move them away from the natural light. We have people who don't want to eat in the canteen because it's too noisy, so we would say, okay, we'll make sure that your team understands why you don't want to eat with them in the canteen, and it's nothing to do with any social challenges. It's just you need a bit of quiet at your lunchtime, or you might need to get up and walk around every hour for a little while. So all of these things, as I'm listing them, you can hear they're just things that a neurotypical person might need as well. I think the key to success is allowing that individual to explain to you what they need to be successful, and that's often missed if you don't understand the person's on the spectrum, because they wouldn't feel comfortable to express their needs, or the questions wouldn't be asked. And so then if they start getting up every hour on the hour at a certain time to walk around, people start wondering why they're doing that, and it can create some lack of integration into the team, which you want to avoid. So those are some examples of accommodation that we looked at. And then I would say accommodation in terms of our onboarding process, again, very simple. It's just to make the onboarding very straightforward, clear, and logical. And sometimes our onboarding processes aren't that clear and straightforward and logical, but that helps the individuals when they come on board. And now those processes are replicated for everyone who starts within a team, and it's only benefited the rest of the organization and the teams to have that very logical, clear process of onboarding. So there's lots of ways that we as an organization can accommodate, but it's very basic. And so that's why I would say encourage people to just start doing the program, and it evolves as you meet with different people. I suppose one other piece that's important that I haven't mentioned is timing. So depending on the individual, they may need to not work 5 days a week. They may need to work 4, 3, or they might not starting early. They might be better working later in the afternoon, so they start at 10 instead of 8, or vice versa. They want to start at 8. So we're very flexible in terms of hours that people work, as long as it's compatible with the business, and that's a big one to ensure people are successful, but also very easy to implement.
I want to pick up on something you said there that I think is really interesting, which is that a lot of the accommodations that work well for autistic people are actually very much people-friendly accommodations more generally as well. So, I was at the launch of this initiative actually over 6 years ago. So you really were one of the first movers in Ireland around this issue. And I guess what I'd be really interested to hear a little bit more of is, how has implementing autism-friendly practice within your business, how has that influenced the company overall? Has it benefited other staff members also?
100%, yes. So we started the program really to meet a need of skills. So this is not part of our corporate social responsibility agenda. This was, one of our managing directors in India had a child on the autistic spectrum and saw an opportunity. He said, okay, people on the spectrum have amazing technology skills. I work at a technology company. We have a skills gap. Okay, let's see what we can do here to marry these two resources up. So that's where it started for us. So it did start pure business, bottom line, how do we find these skills we need? And so the benefit, so the first and foremost benefit is that we've hired great people who are meeting the needs of our business and who are incredibly loyal. That's one huge piece in this day and age where people are headhunted constantly and where there's high turnover in technology organizations. It's amazing to have people in your business who are very loyal and very committed to staying within the organization, which is definitely an attribute of the candidates I would say we've hired. In addition to that, where has it benefited the rest of the organization? Our employee engagement would have absolutely been impacted because people feel very proud to work for an organization that is as inclusive as SAP is around autism. Most people know someone or have some connection with autism. And therefore, for them to see within SAP that we're hiring people on the spectrum and including them as our normal day-to-day business practices, they find that really, that is the social benefit of the program, is people feel really good about that and want to come to SAP and feel that it's aligned with our purpose-driven culture, which is that's intangible. You can't really quantify that, but it does show up in our employee engagement results, and it would definitely contribute to our diversity engagement scores and impact that in a positive way. The other benefit I would say is the impact it can have on a team and bringing the team together and more cohesion in a team, because there is when people have hired a member of the team that's on the spectrum, there's a group support system there that everyone wants to see that person be successful. So there can be more engagement and cohesion in the team that is a result of having someone who's come in on the team. And lastly, not lastly, but one of the other points is around education and increasing awareness of people on the autistic spectrum, because lots of people don't have a lot of understanding and education in terms of what people on the spectrum are capable of doing, and this just highlights incredibly, the huge impact and the success they can have in a corporate world. And I think that's a really important message to send, and then that just that just changes the perception when people are working alongside people who are contributing meaningfully and being progressed and developing, and we do had one person who moved into a management position even. So it can really reduce and destroy a lot of misconceptions around people who are on the spectrum, which is another huge benefit, I think, to our organization as well.
Thank you so much, Kristen. I think something you said just there a second ago really leads us in very nicely to this next segment, and that is, you said that it's not part of your CSR agenda. I think so. Businesses think, well, we're working with a different type of charity this year, and I think that can be sometimes the biggest barrier to this issue, which is that this isn't about charity. It's not about doing this as the nice thing to do. Rather, it's about matching talented people to jobs and recognizing that businesses need people with certain skill sets, and autistic people have all of those skill sets. And by making these accommodations, you're contributing to a diverse team. And I think also, hopefully, you're getting the best possible people for your roles as well. So
Definitely.
I think that leads us in really nicely to, I suppose, get some different perspectives of how this can work successfully on the ground, because I think for this to work, you really do need a whole of company approach. And I think that's something that Specialisterne is really good at fostering, because obviously you need leadership and management buy-in, and you need candidates to believe in the program and feel that they can work within the company. And critically, the one that I think is often missed, you need colleagues and managers to understand the importance of the scheme and to buy into it. So we're going to hear some of those perspectives now, and I'm delighted, first of all, to come to Liam Ryan, who's the General Manager of SAP here in Ireland. Liam, I think it's fair to say you've shown great leadership in this area over the last number of years, and I suppose we want to hear more about what led you to bring this program here to Ireland and how you feel it's impacted SAP as a company.
Sure. I mean, Kristen just talked a little bit about it. It started really with a phone call a number of years ago from Feroz, who's the MD of the labs in India. And Feroz's son had been recently, at that stage, diagnosed with autism, and he set about doing a lot of research, and he came across Specialisterne. And at the same time, Specialisterne were looking to set up in Ireland. So he reached out to me and he said, Liam, would you host a meeting with, at the time, Torkel Sonne, who was the founder of Specialisterne, and just listen to him to what he has to say. And I have to say, I was blown over by what Torkel was trying to achieve at a global level. What he had achieved already as an individual in terms of bringing people with autism into the workplace, and what he was looking to achieve in Ireland. And I knew Feroz quite well, so he's a very persuasive individual. And to be honest, I mean, I thought about it, and it made perfect sense. As an organisation, we're always looking for talent. As an organisation, we have mentoring as part of our DNA, supporting colleagues as part of our DNA. So I was very confident that with the support of an organisation like Specialisterne, who would, but as I saw it, work on a lot of the more difficult things around assessing the candidates and providing the training, then that's the kind of organisation that we could work with and really to help roll out this programme. So that's really where it all kicked off from there. I mean, you mentioned there in terms of the positives, we were certainly learning at the very, very beginning, but what really came across was the willingness by our staff, by our colleagues, by managers, and by colleagues in the organisation just to embrace the project and to run with it as well. Certainly the single biggest positive out of it is certainly the candidates on one side and the colleagues then on the other side as well. And we ourselves have learned, yes, it is very much all around the talent, but we gain so many insights into how to manage correctly, not to use sarcasm as a leadership skill, etc. It just doesn't work in our mentoring process, in our leadership development. I mean, there have been so many, what I would say, is positive side effects that have come out of this program. It's not just a source of talent, but it's also it's embedded now in our culture. But it was always there anyway. But it just reinforced the whole culture within the organisation. So it has been very, very beneficial.
I think what's really interesting in what you're saying is it jars very much maybe with what some business leaders would think about when they think about the idea of inclusive employment. Very often what people immediately start thinking about is the barriers or the reasons why you couldn't do it. So people can have all sorts of misconceptions maybe about health and safety requirements, and maybe the fact that productivity might be affected in some way, that there might be a significant financial outlay that a company will incur. I guess what would your experience say to those misconceptions? Have you seen those misconceptions in reality?
I would say at the very beginning, some of the misconceptions were around the CV more than anything else, which would be natural anyway. You know, when you have either managers or the talent acquisition, the recruitment team looking at it, just reviewing a CV first. But a lot of those are very easily assuaged by working with an organisation like Specialisterne. Now, it does need, what I will say is it does need leadership. It needs a significant buy-in from certainly senior leaders within the organisation that this makes perfect sense. And I mean, you know, certainly it was a little bit easier for me in that having spoken to Feroz, he explained how he feels the program would work. But apart from that, there is very else that you will need in the organization. You certainly will need people who are willing to make it happen. You know, we from day one, we looked at who could help drive this program, and Kristen effectively stood up and said, I want to drive this program. This is something that's very close to my heart. So you do need within an organization people who will drive the program. After that, it's very much around understanding and communication and explanation of what's involved, and there is very little involved, because when you work with an organization like Specialisterne, they really do, you know, they're the people who are working with candidates who are on the spectrum all the time, and they help you out at the very beginning. After that, then, you know, once you've hired your first, your second, your third colleague, it becomes an awful lot easier. Then it's peer-to-peer recommendation, which is really, really important within the organisation. You know, now we've spread it across 2 sites, Dublin and Galway. You know, there's 11 colleagues that are across a complete variety of disciplines, different types of roles, from support to customer facing, people who've taken up management roles. So I'd like to think now this is very much a self-fulfilling. And you mentioned at the very end there in the question, the piece around the financial viability of the program. I mean, we receive certainly assistance from the government, the Irish government as well. Anybody who hires somebody on the spectrum will receive those as well, and they then form part of our fee that we pay, or that Specialisterne charge for the ongoing management and the ongoing help that they provide here. So it is very much a self-sustaining program within SAP now, and any of the outlay is simply outlay that we want to maintain by keeping Specialisterne engaged, and especially for the candidate's sake, but also to make sure that this is spread throughout, this culture is spread throughout the whole organization.
That's fantastic. I think my final question for you is, I think it's very clear from everything that you're saying, and also I think by the fact that you're here in the middle of COVID-19 and all the complications of that this is something that yourself and everyone in SAP thinks is really important. But I think one of the things that we're all wondering about now is what the post-COVID-19 world is going to look like. I think obviously even the narrative about full employment and hidden talent pipeline is going to be challenged somewhat, because businesses are going to be very much thinking about back to basics, are maybe going to be re-looking at their priorities. Do you think this is more important than ever in a post-COVID-19 world?
Absolutely. I mean, SAP are a purpose-driven organization. Anyway, our mission is to help the world run better and improve people's lives. And I think all organizations need a purpose of some description. And I think in the post-COVID-19 world, I mean, it's going to be really, really important. The one thing that, I mean, our Autism at SAP program really demonstrated is that as an organization, we have very much a can-do attitude. And if you really want to promote within your organization that you can do something, this is really something that I would be very confident every organization can do. Yes, it takes a little bit of work at the start and during the phases, but it really proved to us that we can do it. And I mean, you know, it's a lot of it is around, or all of it is around leadership, and we definitely need to understand what can we do in very, very difficult times to enhance the talent makeup of the organization, the diversity mix within the organization. And certainly, I mean, we have experienced significant benefits by having the Autism and SAP program within Labs Ireland. And I really, you know, in terms of trying to enhance those benefits within an organization, I think a program like this would be very beneficial, especially in a post-COVID-19 era.
Thank you so much, Liam. And now we very much want to hear from somebody who stood in the shoes and has walked in the walk and experienced the program firsthand. So I'm delighted to introduce Nick Rankin, who I think it's fair to say is the, I think, second candidate ever hired by Specialisterne here in Ireland. And the first, oh, apologies.
I'm the first.
Apologies. Hire number
No
one.
worries, apology accepted.
Ground zero. So thanks so much for joining us, Nick.
No problem at all.
And would you mind sharing with us for a few minutes just about, I suppose, your journey to employment with Specialisterne and SAP?
Absolutely, yeah. So basically, a little bit of background. I graduated with an honours degree in computer science in 2011, and then I went looking for work. And my CV was okay. I did go for one or two interviews, but I have a problem, and this was discussed earlier about provisions being made. I only wear tracksuit bottoms. I can't wear jeans. I can't wear suits. And obviously, something like that is it's a bit of an issue to a traditional interview corporate environment. So that was obviously an issue. And yeah, it meant that I had to go many years, 3 years, without any meaningful employment. I did do a bit of IT work. I did a couple of websites for people, and I did make a little bit of money that way. But what happened was my dad, I think, heard on the radio about Specialisterne and got in touch with them. Now, I wasn't living at home at the time, so he got in touch with me then, and I said, yeah, this sounds like a great idea. And I basically met up, and I was the first candidate, so I think Specialisterne were still learning at the time as well how they were going to approach the whole thing. And I was actually able to give some feedback as well with some of the processes they wanted to use. And because I would be quite technical, IT was always a strong point for me. And so I was able to help them as well. So Specialisterne helped me, and they placed me in Microsoft, where I had a 14-month contract with Microsoft. And then after that, I was placed in SAP, where I remain now. And I can say that in all cases, Specialisterne, they're very supportive. And if you have any problems at all, they will listen to you, they will help you, they will arrange a meeting with the required parties. They keep in touch constantly, even during the COVID-19 at the moment where everyone's working from home, including myself. They will keep in touch to make sure that you're doing okay. So they are very good, they're very supportive, particularly when you start new, because for people with Asperger's or on the autism spectrum, they might have challenges, they might have issues, and they mightn't be comfortable social aspect of the office environment or the canteen or whatnot. So Specialisterne do help. They do meet with the teams that the prospective candidates will be going into, and they do have a meeting and discuss basically how autism can affect people and that kind of thing. So it's great. They're very supportive, and they've certainly worked. They've worked very well with SAP and other organisations as well. Have hired people, and SAP have been very good as well. To me, they've been very helpful, very supportive. From a personal point of view, I would have to say that they're very, very supportive, and everyone, management, HR, just everyone is very supportive. So it's great. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nick, for sharing your story with us. I guess one of the things that I just wanted to touch on was you've very much given us your journey there and the barriers you faced and how SAP and Specialisterne have helped overcome those to everybody's benefit. I think it's fair to say by the sounds of it. Yeah. I guess other autistic people sitting at home listening to this maybe have had interviews before and not had a very pleasant experience or just don't know where to start. What would you say to them?
What I'd say now, when I got diagnosed, and I was actually a late diagnosis, when I was in college, I was diagnosed back in 2007, and I'd never heard of Asperger's syndrome, or I'd heard of autism, but not Asperger's syndrome. And back then it wasn't really known about. And I think nowadays people do know about it and understand it, and I think that's a good thing. So yes, I would say definitely to people, the great thing is now I think companies are realizing the potential of people on the autism spectrum with Asperger's. They realize how valuable they can be to the organization. And the thing is, as Kristen said, there might be some minor changes that need to be made or minor considerations that are required. But for an IT company, for SAP, the tracksuit bottoms thing wasn't an issue. And I see other people in the organisation wear tracksuit bottoms in the office as well. So it's not something that is unique to me in SAP. So, you know, that's the thing, that there are, you know, it is great that now that people know about autism or Asperger's and autism spectrum disorder. And another thing I will say is that this is actually, I'm actually working from home here in my house, that I've got a mortgage now. And obviously, you know, that you wouldn't get a mortgage if you didn't, you know, you didn't have work. So in fairness, you know, that's the kind of, that can happen, you know. That's the way I think people need to think. And I think it's much more positive nowadays. I think companies are embracing it a lot more, and I think they understand the human side to it as well, for the small considerations that the company might have to maintain. The reward can be huge. So yeah.
Definitely. You've referenced your team and your colleagues a good couple of times, and I know certainly from talking to autistic people, disclosure can be something that can be really challenging for people, telling their colleagues and their teammates. How have you found that experience within SAP?
Yeah, it's funny actually. Some people who have Asperger's don't like other people knowing it. It doesn't bother me. I have it. I think it's actually good that people know it, because it kind of helps people understand. But people are different, and there might be people listening in now that have Asperger's and don't want people to know. And you know, there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm sure it could be arranged that they could join a team where they could join as normal and people wouldn't need to know. Getting back to my team, the team I'm working with at the moment are really supportive of me. In fact, we're great friends. We're not just teammates. I would meet up with several of my work colleagues outside of work setting, and we would definitely be friends. So it's more than that. It's great. You know, I've had a great experience, and this whole COVID-19 thing, it's actually I prefer to be in the office, because it's not as sociable, obviously, being on what you call the Skype or link or Zoom calls. So it is what you call something that it is a great team I'm working on, and they're really supportive. And as I said, I've got friends on the team, it's not just work colleagues, so it's great.
One final question for you, I suppose. So we've heard a good bit about your recruitment and your onboarding. How important is it, the fact that you have ongoing support from Specialisterne and your colleagues, that challenges can change and you have someone to go to just maybe raise issues before they become problems?
Yeah, well, that did happen with me initially in SAP, and it can happen that maybe the wrong fit is chosen, or you struggle in a certain area, and that is where Specialisterne will come into play, and they'll be able to sit down with you, with management, and try and work out a solution. And that's what happened to me. And now I am full-time permanent employee with SAP. So yes, it didn't start perfectly, would we say, but everywhere, all the way through, even though there was a couple of hiccups along the way, all the way through, everyone was supportive, including management and SAP side, including Specialisterne. So there is that connection between, if things don't work out, the management will work with Specialisterne to work out a solution.
That's fantastic. And I think just employers listening to you and your story and your loyalty to the organization, it'll be very clear that it's a no-brainer that every company needs to be doing these sort of activities.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I guess critical to making all this work on the ground, and everybody's mentioned it right throughout the talk, not least you, Nick, is the importance of managers and colleagues being supportive. So it's great to be joined by Richard, who's a manager within SAP. And I suppose what I'd like to learn a little bit about, Richard, is what's the experience been like managing autistic colleagues, and how have you found your involvement in the program?
I think it's been an exceptional experience for myself and the team, and also not just from our local team, but globally as well. When we can see somebody like Nick that has come into the team, originally he would have had a mentor, and then after getting technically up to speed, really enjoying the technology, getting stuck in, now we can see that Nick turns around and mentors half the rest of the team, and that's the success, and that's what we want really from every candidate that comes in, whether it's from autism at work or not.
Brilliant. I guess I've just a couple of questions. I guess I often think that the forgotten stakeholder can be colleagues, because, you know, more so than anyone else in the workplace, who you're spending most of your day with. And yet, from in terms of a buy-in or an engagement point of view, it's something we don't always think about. Has colleague education been part of your program? And if so, how important has that been?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Specialisterne really took a lead on this, and really have supported the team all the way from the very beginning, just giving info sessions on, you know, a little bit about autism. I know myself that in my life's experience through family and friends, that I didn't have much experience. So really attending info sessions within SAP was very important for me, just to get a basic understanding. And you know, that just leads to the team understanding, and then when they meet the candidate, you know, it just normalizes everything. And by everybody getting educated and kind of understanding more, it just normalizes everything, and yeah, you know, it becomes a success on the back of that.
That's fantastic. One thing you referenced was just the term mentor. And I suppose, would you be able to explain to us maybe the difference between a mentor and a manager, and why a mentor can be an important part of the recipe for success?
Yeah, and I'll go back to, you know, it's a recipe for success for every employee, and not just for candidates that come in from autism at work. That, you know, if somebody is coming in and they're working on a technical area, that they need help working through that technical area, they can ask any questions at any time. Something as simple as going down to the canteen, or something within their technical area. So I think the mentor within the team is essential, very much for the candidate coming in from the autism at work program. Yeah. So looking at it from a manager's perspective, the difference between the mentor and the manager, really I'm there just to, you know, make sure that the employee is excited about their work, that they can find their niche within the technologies that they really enjoy, and kind of they can be successful on the back of that. So really the mentor is there for the day-to-day, just being that person that can work through the issue. And then it's for me just to have more of a kind of an overview of what's happened with the employee, just to keep them motivated.
Fantastic. I guess I want to pick up on something Liam mentioned a few minutes ago, which is that, you know, actually managing autistic staff can make you a better manager overall. What have you learned as a manager from working with autistic colleagues?
Yeah, I think from the point that I started managing the guys from autism at work, I really had to look at how I was interacting with everybody on the team, and especially the guys from autism at work, and how I was communicating within team meetings, how I was communicating through emails on a one-to-one basis, and how I was looking at really how the overall team works together. So, you know, those skills had to be enhanced. And I think that's something as a person and as a manager that I've really grown. So, you know, Nick, who's a superstar within our team and our organization, is not just helping customers on a day-to-day basis. He's helping every teammate around him within his team globally, but also he's keeping me on my toes as well.
I think this has been a huge insight into both the work of Specialisterne, but also the fantastic leadership being shown by SAP here in Ireland and indeed around the world. I guess where we just want to close out today is, we've given people lots to think about, but I think it's always nice to have a couple of key messages. So what I want to ask everyone who's spoken is one key message they'd say to employers who are thinking about autistic. One key message for employers who are thinking about beginning to hire autistic talent. And we might start with yourself, Peter.
Thanks. Before I finish, thanks very much for everybody in SAP. It's really been very good. I would say follow their model. That is, try it, suck it and see. Because we have gone to a number of companies and they said, we'll have to make the whole place autism friendly and that. But every autistic person, like the rest of us, is different. So the easiest thing is just to suck it and see that it isn't a lot of difficult work, as Kristen particularly referred to. And most of the heavy lifting is actually done by Specialisterne for you, and we line it up for you. So just try it, and it really will work.
Brilliant. Kristen?
I will echo Peter's sentiment that, and say that the first step any organization should take is to partner with an organization such as Specialisterne. And of course, I would advocate Specialisterne since they've been our partners for the last 7 years now, very successfully. And my second, I'm giving 2 pieces. You said 1, but I can't help myself. I have to give 2. Is within, so you partner with Specialisterne, but then internally you do need to have one person who is a strong advocate and stays focused on it and continues to work with the program. Now, that person can't operate in isolation. They need people on the ground. They need the leadership. They need the organizational leadership. But having one person focused on it is also very important to keep the momentum of the program in place.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Liam?
Especially for leaders out there, this program, over all the years that I've been with SAP, I received the most feedback, all positive, from employees in the entire organization. So if you're looking for something that can really have an impact on all employees, this is a program that certainly will do that. So, and it is all about the talent. I mean, it's very much a win-win scenario. So you get the talent and you certainly significantly improve engagement and awareness of autism as well at the same time.
Fantastic. Nick?
Yeah, I think that, as you've heard, it's such an important thing that companies should really consider. I have spoken at panel discussions before with HR professionals, and I have had people come up to me after, HR professionals, and they come up and say, they enjoyed the speech or whatever, and they were saying it would be great because my grandson, my son, my daughter has Asperger's, and I'd love to get this set up in my organisation. And it's not just once, it's a couple of times people have come up. So I think it is very important to organisations. Most people out there, as I think you brought up there, Adam, most people will know. They'll have, even if they don't have a direct relation, they'll know someone who is on the spectrum and someone they care about, and they would obviously want for them to be able to work and do the normal things such as get a mortgage, all this kind of stuff. And it is possible, and organisations can enable it.
Fantastic. And finally, Richard?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway that I have is that, within the team, you can really have a sense of community and something that everybody's quite proud of. And I think that, that's something that the guys from Autism at Work bring to within our teams. Yeah, that's my takeaway.
Fantastic. Well, I think in a short space of time, we've really told the story very well, and hopefully I've given people are having a lot of thinking time at the moment. So hopefully this is food for thought that really creates jobs and opportunities on the other side. We hope you've enjoyed today's webinar, and we'll be back again next Wednesday, where we're going to be looking at the whole area of maximizing employability. So what can you do as an individual candidate to place yourself well to be able to access the workforce as an autistic person? We're really looking forward to that, and there will be an opportunity through the Specialisterne and As I Am channels to submit any questions you might have in advance of that. But I know that Peter will be very keen to thank the Ability Programme for supporting Specialisterne and As I Am to make this possible today. We're hugely grateful to everyone here from SAP who's given their time and energy to today, because I know it's a busy time with so much change going on. And finally, Peter, the last word goes to you, and any final message for people watching.
To employers, please join us. There's no doubt about it. There's a real opportunity to gain talent here. And for people who have autism and are thinking about maybe should they contact us now, we're very much open for business, and we would really like to talk to you. And nearly everybody benefits in some way. And I think ultimately Nick is a good example of all of that. Thanks very much for all your time, everybody. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. And all the contact details for the organizations here today will be up on the screen at the end. So if you want to get in touch, please do so. So thanks very much, everybody, and have a good week.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Bye, guys.
Okay.